and welcome to my video for day number 15 of Inktober. So, jumping right into talking about this piece specifically, the only way I could accurately describe my experience with this piece is that I wrestled with it. For some reason, when it came time to actually execute this piece after I had completed the sketch, I had to try 3 separate times in order to get the final version to even somewhat resemble the sketch. I am not sure why this happened. I had already drawn that morning, so it wasn't like I hadn't warmed up, but for some reason I couldn't even trace properly. I think it might have had something to do with the fact that the shape of the eyes in this particular sketch kind of blended a little bit into where I started adding in eyeliner, and those type of details didn't quite show through on my lightbox. I couldn't quite see where the eye ended and where the makeup began, and so when it came time to actually draw the eyes, I couldn't really get that same feeling. Because the eyes are a very, very important part of drawing a human face, and if you change the angle of them, if you change anything about them, it can look like a completely different person. And normally I would just let that go. I would just say, oh, well, this person looks like this now, and I would go with it. But I really, really liked this sketch, and I didn't want to change it too much. Now, regardless of the struggle I went through in order to create this finished piece, I do like the way that it turned out in the end. So I do think that it was worth it. And I'm glad that I did retry it instead of just going with what I had initially put down on paper. Now, looking at the actual elements that this piece consists of, I knew that with the prompt Dagger, I wanted to contrast it with something that was a bit more pretty. That is very much my style. I like to blend things that are a little bit more traditionally beautiful with things that are more traditionally creepy. I think that it creates an interesting blend and it actually plays very well together. And in this particular illustration, I decided to do that with her dress. I added some embellishment bits to her dress that are very reminiscent of some pieces I've done previously in the month. As I mentioned in those videos, I have been trying to get better at clothing and just detail in general. And in this particular instance, it ended up giving a lot of interest that wouldn't have otherwise been there. However, I do think that one of my very favorite parts of this illustration is not actually the drawing itself, but rather the background. It comes across as kind of mottled and textured, which wasn't necessarily intentional. I'm going to let you in on that little secret. It was more the fact that I unevenly applied the ink. I didn't move quite fast enough, and I added a bit more water in some areas. But even though it wasn't intentional, I do think that it looks cool, and so I'm okay with it. Another thing that I had a lot of fun with this piece specifically was the fact that I drew in a lot of the shading. It's not quite cross-hatching or hatching because it does have some hard edges. The way that the effect looks in this particular piece isn't quite as good as it's been when I've done this in the past. But I do think it adds a little bit of drama and flair to the piece, which I like, so I'm glad that I did it in the end. And as I mentioned, I have done this in my work in the past, and it's something that I really like experimenting with. I actually initially started doing it after I saw something similar in the art style of an anime I was watching. And I just really liked the effect of it so much. It felt so intense. And so I eventually ended up deciding to try it. In the end, the way that this particular effect looks in my artwork looks nothing like it looked in the show, and quite frankly, I wasn't intending for it to. To me, this is something that is very interesting about art and art style as a whole. In my opinion, art style is something that is very personal. In a way, your art style, if you haven't copied it from someone, if you've developed it on your own, it is very much a representation of you as an artist, or rather as a person. All of the things that you've experienced, everything you like, all of that combines on the page to create something that expresses you as an individual. And because of this, it often means that the development of art style is a very slow and tedious type of process. It can mean slowly incorporating things that you like into your work, or even just things that sound interesting. If it sounds like something you might like to try, even if it's not inspired by anyone per se. You might just think one day that you want to do something differently. A good example of this might be the way that I do hair. I started doing my hair in this way because I had been drawing some butterflies and I had been creating the patterns in their wings. And I thought it might be interesting to try a similar concept in strands of hair on a human figure. And that was something that I just decided to try on a whim, and I've been doing my hair that way ever since. And so to me, art style is something that generally happens gradually and without you really trying for it to happen. I know a lot of times people want to force an art style, especially new artists. They want an art style and they want something that represents them, or something that people will be able to look at and say, oh yes, this is so-and-so's work. Unfortunately, if you try to force an art style, it doesn't tend to be as true to you. It tends to be more a reflection of what you want it to be. In my experience, art style is something that is constantly evolving. A lot of times it's trial and error. It's experimenting with new things. It's trying them and seeing what works and what doesn't work. It's seeing what you like and what you don't like through doing it. It doesn't tend to happen right away. It's more of a constantly evolving process. But eventually I find that a style will come, and it will be a lot more true to you than it would be if you tried to force it. So I hope that little ramble on art style was kind of interesting to you. I am not sure exactly what caused me to think of it in context to this piece, but I hope my thoughts on it were useful or interesting to you. And without dragging this out any further, I am going to transition us into the part of the video where I'm picking the prompt for the next one. So here is my finished illustration for day number 15 of Inktober using the prompt Dagger. And since I mentioned that there were a few prior attempts at creating this piece, I thought that I would show you. And there's just something about their faces that I don't care for very much. Because I liked the face of the original sketch so much, I just couldn't leave it at something that didn't quite express this. So let's move this out of the way and pick the next prompt. Here is our prompt hat, and let's go. We'll go with this one, and the prompt is filigree. I've been trying to get better at drawing more intricate details in my work, which is probably the reason that I put this prompt into the hat in the first place. So it'll be interesting to see how I can create a piece entirely based on that concept. I also don't know if I have quite enough prompts to finish out the month in here, so I might have to add a few more. So thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it or got something out of it. You can subscribe if you would like to follow the rest of my Inktober journey, and I will see you guys next time.